Before acorns can be processed, they have to be shelled. To crack open the acorn's shell, set one up on end and rap it sharply with a small rock until it breaks apart. The shell should split easily lengthwise and open to reveal the nut inside. If the shell smashes into pieces, just use a smaller rock. If you don't have a small rock handy, you can also use a hammer to crack the shells. When you take the nut out of the shell, be sure to remove the brown papery sheath, like the kind that's on the outside of a peanut. This is called the testa and contains high levels of tannic acid, making it very astringent. If you don't remove the testa, your acorns will always taste bitter and leave you with a feeling of cotton mouth, no matter how much leaching you do. The testa on the white oak varieties is smooth, and on the red oak varieties it's kind of fuzzy, like on the skin of a peach. This is one of the ways that you can tell the difference between white and red oak acorns. Some acorns, especially white oak varieties, may already have begun to sprout. If you see a little sort of tail breaking through one end of the shell, don't worry about it. Just break it off and put the nut in with the rest of your shelled acorns. If you see a small hole on the outside of the nut, there's a good chance that an acorn weevil was inside and exited out through that hole. The baby weevil eats on the nut as it grows, leaving a brown powder or frass, which is essentially weevil poop. If you're working with large acorns, or if there's only a small amount of damage to the nut, you can just trim off the affected area and keep the rest of the nut. If you find a live weevil still inside, chickens or other birds just love them. Or you can toss them into a hot frying pan and add them to your stir fry. Weevils are high in fat and protein, and some people find them very tasty. Or you can just squish them and toss them aside. One of the reasons to definitely discard a nut is mold. If you see any greenish coloration or any whitish powder or any fuzz on the nut, just discard the entire thing. Now, dark discoloration alone is not necessarily indicative of mold. Sometimes the nut will have harder areas that are a darker color. However, whenever you're in doubt, just discard. After your nuts have all been shelled, give them a once-over and be sure to scrape off any remaining testa that may have stuck to the nut. You can also trim away any remaining areas of weevil or other types of damage that you may have initially missed. If your acorns are large, like these are, carefully cut them into smaller pieces. Fresh acorns are fairly easy to cut, and the nuts will dry faster and be easier to work with. If the acorns you're working with are smaller, it's not necessary to cut them up. They're fine to work with whole or in halves. Traditionally, acorns were dried in the shell, and most people still do this today. However, drying them in the shell drastically increases the likelihood of both weevil damage and mold, as well as sprouting. And once a nut has begun to sprout, it must be either frozen or processed right away. After losing almost half of our acorn harvest to mold and sprouting one very wet fall, we decided never again, and now we always shell them first. By shelling your acorns before drying them, you will stop weevils in their tracks, stop the sprouting process, and make certain that the nut meat is thoroughly dried before storage, meaning no more mold. And once they're dried, acorns will last almost indefinitely. Now yes, you will lose a small amount of nutritional value by shelling before drying, but you will lose far fewer acorns to sprouting and damage and mold, which in our view more than makes up for it. And even with this small loss, you will still be making flour that is far more nutritious than anything you can buy at the store, so get your acorns shelled first. When it comes to processing your acorns, particle size is key, and you're going to hear us say that over and over and over again. So before you begin processing them any further, it's important to reduce the acorn size to something around aquarium gravel size or smaller.